players as well. So I'm going to give you 5 things that I've learned, general things. I know a lot of the coaches are going to talk later today are going to get into the nuts and bolts. So I'll focus my attention on 5 things. I'll list them first, and then I'll go back and talk a little bit about each one. The first one is one size does not fit all. Every player on your team is different. So that's one thing to consider. Also, there is no one way to play the game. And that's sometimes some things coaches get mistaken. And I've made that mistake too. Second thing I'll talk about is the importance of a foundation. When we are coaches, is building that foundation for players. Third thing is never forget that the game is a very difficult game to play. The fourth thing is coaches are needed today in the lives of kids more so than any time in our country's history. And the last thing I'll talk about is the importance of respecting the game and getting our players to respect the game. And that comes out in many forms, as I said. So the first one, as I said, when we coach, we have to understand there's no perfect way to coach. There's no one way to do it. We shouldn't do it. I usually use the phrase, if you are coaching every kid on your team the same way, how fast can you stop? Because different players are motivated by different things, and you have to figure out what is going to reach that kid. And so you can't treat every kid on your team equally. And we're always going to be accused of playing favorites. But if I know the kids well, I may have to pat a kid on the back in order to get that kid to be at his best, and I might have to get in a kid's face to get that kid to be the best. And yes, I may be accused of playing favorites to the kid that I patted on the back, but that's the nature of being a coach. When I was in the Twins organization, I had a roommate who was very stubborn. He was a kid with a high draft pick out of high school, threw very hard, tremendous athlete, but he thought he could just throw the ball by everybody like he did in high school. And of course, in pro ball, that just doesn't work. So our pitching coach tried everything and totally got fed up and basically said, I'm going to use sarcasm. So I'm playing shortstop at the time, and he's just like always goes out in the field, and it's ball 1, ball 2, because it's up in the zone, not really doing anything to pitch. Pitching coach calls timeout, runs out in the field, and so I always like to walk in and hear what they were saying. So he goes, hey Pat, here's what I want you to do. I want you to keep throwing the ball absolutely as hard as you can. Don't get ahead in the count. Don't mix your pitches. Don't work on location. Don't change speeds, because I want to see just how long we can be out here tonight. Go get him, Pat. Turn around and walk back, and I'm walking back to my position with my glove in front of my face, and the kid's on the mound like, what? So, yeah, we have to try everything. And so no one style is going to fit everybody. Now, me and Jimmy Rollins kind of have a love-hate relationship. In one way, I was glad to see him go because of a lot of the things that I thought he did wrong, attitude-wise and playing-wise. But he played shortstop every day for many, many years, and that is certainly an accomplishment at the major league level. But one thing that Jimmy Rollins did quite a bit was he stayed back on the ball. And that's something we never teach kids. We say, as a shortstop, you need to charge. You need to go get the ball. Jimmy Rollins didn't do that. He stayed back and he let the ball come to him. It worked. And so the point of that is anything we say to a kid, you can't do that. It will not work. You can never be a good baseball player. I guarantee you that kid's going to turn on the TV and see at least one player doing the very thing you said couldn't be done. And that kid's going to look at the TV and say, who should I believe? A volunteer Little League coach who is a construction worker, nothing against construction workers, or Jimmy Rollins who's making $20 million a year? Which one's he going to pick? Okay? So my point is, we can encourage kids, we can tell them, hey, here's a way that I think will help you, but we have to give the kids the freedom to kind of find their way. And I'll get to that in a little bit as well. Second thing is creating that foundation. Okay, as the comedian said, a mobile home really is only mobile in a tornado. Okay, and that's because there's no foundation. And unfortunately, a lot of kids at the high school level have very pretty swings. They have kind of the nice trim work, but they never learned a foundation. And so at your level especially, your primary goal should be creating that foundation. Because if a kid has no foundation, at some point then the game is going to knock him on his rear end, and he's not going to be able to rebuild. As long as your house has a strong foundation, you can rebuild after a storm. And baseball is a game that is going to constantly knock your house down. And if you never have a solid foundation, it's going to be very tough for you to rebuild. So, in that regard, one of the things that coaches have to understand the difference between is technique and procedure, and I'll talk about in a second, and the difference between the two, and the importance of keeping everything as simple as possible, not making the game complicated. The game is hard enough as it is, and if we get kids thinking too much about the difficult parts and the intricate nature of the game, sometimes it can make things tougher. So here you have three hitters, okay? Kevin Youkilis on the left, Jeff Bagwell, and Joe Mauer. And I think if we're young coaches, we would look at Joe Mauer and say, I want all my kids to hit like that. That's the perfect stance. If we had kids show up like this, we would probably pull them aside and say, it's just flat out not going to work. No way. You can't hold a bat like this. I mean, his hands are separated, okay? Once again, we say that, and the kid turns on the TV and sees a perennial 300 hitter, and then someone who is borderline Hall of Famer, and wonders, well, who's right, my coach or what I'm seeing on TV? But what you're seeing here is technique. And kids need to develop the ability, the freedom, to develop the technique on their own. The non-negotiables are the procedure. Okay? Now here are the same three hitters at the point of contact. That's procedure. Those are the non-negotiables. Doesn't matter what the hitter is, doesn't matter how they start, and the same thing could go with pitching. Doesn't matter how they start, if they get to that point, at the point of contact, they're going to hit. And so as a coach, if we focus on the procedures, the 3 or 4 most common basic things that all hitters must do, how they get to that point, that's technique. That's where a kid is going to have to fine-tune it himself and do what's comfortable for them. So if we as coaches tell kids every little fine point technique, sometimes that isn't the best technique for them. Sometimes it's better to focus on the core principles, and I think a lot of the coaches later today are going to be getting into some of those core things that we can focus a lot of attention on. The third thing is, never forget that the game is a very hard game to play. You may have heard the saying in baseball, baseball is the only occupation where you can fail 7 out of 10 times and be considered great. Okay, maybe you can throw in weather forecaster in there too, but that is generally true with baseball. It is a game that is designed to chew you up and spit you out. It's a hard game to play. So the soccer effect, because it is so hard, that is one of the reasons why we lose kids to sports like soccer and lacrosse. They're great sports. I played soccer my whole life through high school. I'm one of those weird people that can sit in front of the TV and watch an entire 1-0 soccer game and not be bored. Okay, that's me. But we're losing kids to soccer, in part because of how we design our practices and so forth. And so a big part of the speakers later is to help you along those lines. You can also hide in soccer. You can't hide in baseball. Okay, sooner or later, a little kid has to get a bat, and he has to walk up to the plate in front of everybody, and everybody is going to know how good or how bad that kid is. In virtually every other sport, basketball, soccer, lacrosse, minute left in the game, tie game, coach can call timeout. He can design a play specifically to put the ball in the best kid's hands, and they have a chance to win. It's not the case in baseball. Seventh inning, tie game, bases loaded, your 9th batter comes up to the plate. Not much you can do, okay? And everybody's going to know if that kid can play or not. So it's a very tough game, and that's why we lose kids to the sports that I would say you can hide a little bit. And so how you design your practices can go a long way of making baseball more fun, to eliminate that difficult nature of the game, but also redefining success. And I'm not the only one who said this. If a hitter hits 4 line drives right at somebody and goes 0 for 4, too often that kid goes home thinking, I had a horrible game. That's crazy. And the kid who took 4 horrible swings against a horrible pitcher and ends up getting 4 hits because it's a little dribbler, that kid walks home thinking he's going to be a Major League Baseball player. That's because of the way we define success in baseball, and that needs to change. So as a coach, you have to make sure your kids know what success is in baseball. It's about playing the game right. It's about hitting the ball hard. And the game will beat you up mentally, and if you think success is how many hits you get, how big your average is, even how many wins you get, that is often a very poor way of defining success in baseball. And it'll mentally drag you down. So that's a big part of your goals as a coach as well. The fourth thing is we need coaches more than ever. I'm a high school teacher. I've been teaching high school level about 21 years now. Got a lot of high school teachers in the room here now. Ask any of them and they will tell you every single year it gets more and more difficult to be able to do the things that we know will work to guide kids in the right direction. We're just not allowed to do the things to get kids on track. Parents the same way. Turn on TV, the shows we grew up watching pretty much followed this model. The beginning of the show, the kid would screw up. By the end of the show, the parents would teach the kid the lesson, the kid would learn the moral, and you move on. Today, it's flip-flopped. You will rarely, if ever, see a parent on TV look smart. All the shows make parents look like bumbling fools. It's the kids who end up looking the smartest. And that's having an impact. So it's tough for parents to be able to guide their kids in the right direction. But coaches still have the ability to do a tremendous amount of good. Okay, so don't take that power lightly. I always say the best motivator in the history of the world is the end of that bench. And I get very upset when I watch coaches at the college level, professional level, and the things that they allow their players to do, and it doesn't have to be that way. We have a lot of power, and in a lot of troubled kids' lives, we're the only ones left who are allowed to do that. Because teachers increasingly can't do it, parents have a tougher time doing it, counselors, administrators, their hands are tied. But coaches still have a lot of power, and don't take that lightly. I was talking to a coach one time at another baseball clinic where we were both speaking. And prior to it, we were kind of going through war stories and this and that. We were talking about affecting kids and that. And he goes, well, I've come from 2 extremes. He goes, one of my former players is on death row right now. And he goes, every once in a while I think, maybe if I had spent less time focusing on the kid's swing and more time focusing on how to handle adversity, just maybe that kid could have had a different life. He said, but the other extreme happens too. Because I had another kid, another former player, and if I said his name, you may not remember his name, but I guarantee everybody in the room would recognize his very famous comment from 9/11, let's roll. That kid was on his team, and it made him think. He said, maybe it was something I said about never giving up, or keep trying, play the game the right way, take one for the team. Who knows? And so never forget the power that you have with kids at every level, because you never know what impact it's going to have. The last thing is number 5, and that is respecting the game. And that comes out in many forms. The game has been around a lot longer than we've been around, and it will continue to be around a lot longer after we're gone. And we have to respect that. In the way you make your kids wear your uniform, in the way you make your kids have their hat on correctly. I always say UNI, uni, stands for one, and there's a reason why they don't call it multi-form, because you should have every kid on the team wearing it the same way, and that promotes that team mentality. There's also a reason why I think the Yankees are still the only team that do not allow names on the back of their jerseys, because they have that very respectful aspect of the game where you play for the name on the front, not the name on your back. And that's a constant reminder to the players. And so if we can encourage that out of respect for the game. I always tell coaches that it starts with you, though, when it comes to respecting the game. And I say your audio has to match your video. What you say to your kids, they have to see you actually doing. And if there's a contradiction there, you never know which one they're going to pick. So for example, if you want kids on the field to think for themselves, not wait for the coach to tell them what to do all the time, and then when a kid does that and screws up, do you criticize him? If you want them to think for yourself, you have to encourage them to think for themselves. And even when they screw up, congratulate them for thinking for themselves. They're going to screw up. Like me, that's how I learned to play the game. And that's how they have to learn how to play the game too. So be careful in terms of what you're encouraging and what you are punishing for. If you want them to support your teammates, then don't show them up either. Okay? We would never allow a pitcher to turn around and throw his glove when his shortstop makes an error. But how many coaches, after a team screws up, do you see them take the hat off or drop the clipboard or throw their hands up? They're doing the very things that they don't want their own kids to do. We want, of course, our kids to handle adversity well, but then the kids see you chirping at umpires, and that sends, obviously, a contradictory message there. So be very careful in terms of your audio matching your video, and that's out of respect for your players and also the game as well. And finally, before I let the other coaches jump in there, 95% of what a coach does, nobody sees. And most of your success as a coach is going to occur away from the field. I tell the players that too. You're not going to come to a clinic and become a great baseball player. Your ability to play baseball in the future is what you do away from the field. And it's the same thing with coaching. We're going to hand a lot of resources to you today, particularly about how to organize a practice. And that's the stuff that nobody sees. And because they don't see it, nobody's going to appreciate it. But it goes on. To be a good coach, to be a good teacher, you have to put in the planning. And that requires a lot of work and dedication on your time. And you kind of have to realize you're never going to be fully rewarded for this. But that's where the success actually occurs. As Coach Monero said, I have a website. It was designed to pass on a lot of information to parents, to coaches, to players. I have over 1,000 posts, written posts on how to play the game. I have well over 100 videos on there. So if you ever need any help with any type of aspect of the game, my site is there. There's ebooks that you can download, all kinds of stuff. It's all for people like you who need and want to learn more about the game. All right, folks, well, have a great day. Best of luck in your seasons this year. So I'll pass it back over to Coach Monero.
Thank you.